Dr. said, addiction. So topic, the main reason for this kind of topic for me is I actually lost my dad when I was younger to cardiovascular disease. So, and then my wife actually lost hers to cardiovascular disease when we were dating, and I've lost a friend and a whole bunch of other things from cardiovascular disease along the way. So I kind of wanted to get into looking at cardiovascular health and seeing what we could do in that realm. I also have a lot of family that are in captive population, so it was really nice when I came here and started working with Dr. Abel. I have uncles that are the heads of EMS in New York and their area. I have uncles that have all volunteered as firefighters, and then I have a couple cousins that are state troopers and different things. So the captive population is kind of a little significant to my family too. Not working. Okay. So what are we talking about today? Why is it important to study law enforcement and cardiovascular disease risk? We'll look at some of the traditional risk factors that are associated with them and how that's been affecting law enforcement. And then look at our arterial stiffness, add to the picture. And then the methods that I'm proposing kind of for my study. So why look at officers? The National Occupational Research Agenda, which is put out by NIOSH and the CDC. Their goal is to decrease cardiovascular disease within law enforcement by 10% over the next 2 years. And their sub-goal is to try to identify new risk factors or assessment tools for the population. So this arterial stiffness hasn't been measured in police officers before, so that's kind of one of my basis for this kind of study. And then the cost to taxpayers, the cost to you and I is we get a paycheck. It might be a small one for the stipend that you have here, but you still have to pay taxes, all right? And the cost to employ a law enforcement officer, is about $92,000 in total with healthcare costs, salary, benefits, and all that. So when we have one that's out with cardiovascular disease, an incident like a heart attack or something like that, and they're taking time off, again, taxpayers are kind of losing money, and then you're also losing the safety of having extra officers out on duty. And then another one I thought was kind of interesting is that law enforcement officers have been twice as likely to have cardiovascular disease upon retirement than the general population of similar ages. So when we start looking at a law enforcement officer, we kind of think, all right, they have to meet physical standards to get their job. So once they meet those physical standards, then they can kind of get into the academy. The academy will last, it'll be a certain range of time, usually 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the state and the police department's qualifications for it. So hopefully our officers are getting fit. For here in Lexington, these are the standards that you have to meet in your physical fitness test. So your bench press, you got to be able to do at least 55% of your body weight. For your sit-ups, you have to do 13 sit-ups in a minute. For your 300-meter run, you have to beat it in 68 seconds. For your push-ups, you get 2 minutes. You have to do 14. And then for your 1.5-mile run, you have to be 17 minutes and 56 seconds. Now, when we're looking at cardiovascular health, we're going to look mainly down here at the 1.5-mile run. Now, if we look at Cooper norms and the age ranges that are allowed to become a police officer, so an officer has to be between the age of 21 and 37 to start their career, at least here in Lexington. And there's good stipulations throughout the country for age ranges that they start. So we look at 20 to 30 and 30, we'll say to 40 age range from Cooper norms. This number here is in the very poor, the lowest 20%. All right, for both age ranges. So clearly we're not having high standards for cardiovascular fitness. But hopefully, after they go through their training, they become nice and fit, look good, ready to service, right? Over time, driving segways, maybe riding a bike, or sitting in a car for a long period of time. You start seeing obesity rise in police officers. Start seeing some more obesity as they're spending time on. And then, if you see this guy here, he has a couple little bands, I can't remember what they're called exactly off the top of my head, stripes. As you increase stripe, that means you're going up in rank, right? So he's probably more of a paper pusher or a desk job officer. And once you get to that realm, you're sitting more and possibly have greater obesity, greater risk of cardiovascular disease. So normal cardiac, for the American Heart Association standards of major risk factors for cardiovascular disease is non-modifiable. We have age, sex, heredity, including race. And then we have modifiable, which are smoking, physical activity, hypertension, obesity, high cholesterol, and diabetes. And then they also suggest to look at these other factors. All right, stress, alcohol, diet, nutrition, and career choice. So we'll kind of look at these and see what's already been looked at in the literature. All right, so age, you only have to be 21 to become an officer, and you can retire at 25 years. So you can be retired by 46, and you get half of your salary. And every year after that, you get 2.5% more of what your salary was. Gender, it's a male-dominated profession. It's 85 to 95% male. And then heredity, it is also Caucasian-dominated. I believe the numbers are around 65 to 70% Caucasian. And then what's going on with some of these traditional risk factors again? So we have obesity. We measure by BMI. BMI is over 25, range from different studies have ranged from 71 to 89%. And then with BMIs greater than 30, we have 25 to 39%. So we're seeing some obesity. Abdominal obesity, highly prevalent. One municipality at over 32%. And then it's even higher presence once retirement occurs. However, Al-Saharan, it says there's a misclassification of net 16% underclassified. Now, when I'm saying this, Al-Saharan here, they did a DEXA scan of 500 and some police officers, and then looked at it to try to see, all right, are we classifying them correctly or not? They came up with no. We have misclassified some as obese when they are in fact healthy, but we have also misclassified healthy when they're actually obese or overweight. So the net 16% is saying the classification we see with a BMI marker is we're misclassifying them actually under what they are. So they recommend other means of body composition for this population. And then if we look at hypertension, prevalence range is 15 to 38%, seen in a bunch of different articles that we've looked at. And then upon recent retirement, so within 5 years of retirement, that range actually goes up to 36 to 51%. So it's a dramatic increase, especially if people are retiring in their early 50s. And then misclassification could be a factor. We could actually be saying that a lot of them are healthy when they actually have higher hypertension rates. In this article by Kales, they said that 160 over 90 was an acceptable range for tactical populations to perform their duties. So they were saying you're hypertensive if you're over that, if you're under that, you're in an acceptable range to perform your duties, and you're okay. So a couple of the, Kales did like a review article looking at the different hypertensive numbers that they found, and that's one thing that they kind of saw in a bunch of their articles that they found, and I found that in a couple of articles too, that people are saying, oh, if you're 160 over 90, you're fine, which is extremely high. Right. Police work, when you kind of think of it, you kind of think of, all right, the police chases, if you watch Cops, which is fun, right? You got the dogs chasing out in criminals, you have people jumping out of cars, running down people in pursuit. It's actually mainly sedentary work. All right? They're in the car for most of the day, patrolling. If you live in a more urban environment, you'll see police officers luckily walking around a little bit more. I know here in Lexington we have like a central sector, and those guys are going to be on bikes a little bit more, and they're going to be walking around the downtown sector a little bit more, but they're still going to spend most of their time in the vehicle. The role of a police officer is the energy expenditure here. We got like 1.6 METs, basically the equivalent of a desk job is what they're expending normally. And then Stanford et al., they said police work was not sufficient to maintain physical fitness, should be viewed as sedentary in nature. And then Zimmerman and a couple other articles mentioned this, that the criminals of a similar age are more likely to be fit than our officers. Luckily our officers have radios and they can communicate to each other and they get them. But looking at diabetes, low prevalence, which is a good thing. Similar prevalence upon retirement, so it kind of shoots up once you retire. Smoking, 6% in this Iowa study, and 13 to 19% in the New York study. One thing that was noted in a lot of these articles, the smoking rates have steadily declined. It was high as like almost 60% of police officers in like the 50s. And then came down to about the 80s, I think, is when they started going down to about 30%, and then now it's been just dropping steadily. So that's a good thing. And dyslipidemia, all right. And a self-report, about 32% reported down here. So what are some of the other factors that we're looking at? So we're looking at law enforcement occupational risk factors. There's high levels of stress. This is an officer at 9/11. Officers aren't just catching criminals. They're helping us with random tasks throughout the day. If someone has a flat tire, if an officer sees it, hopefully they'll come over. I've seen it on the roads many times. And even in those situations, officers aren't even sure if it's safe to do it. But they do it because that's what they're expected to do. And that's what they want to do. So they have high psychological stress. They have high noise exposure with sirens. And then physical stresses. All right, we put officers in body armor to protect them. We have them with duty belts that restrict movements. And then shift work is another risk factor. Let's kind of look at all these in a little more detail here. So Remy came up with this whole premise here of looking at stress within law enforcement. Vital exhaustion is the feeling of fatigue, dejectedness, and things like that. So in there is fatigue, being overworked. They say that's one big contributor to their stress. Job strain is duties that they have to perform that they don't really want to do, which we all have that in our jobs, I'm sure of it. But officers kind of say, I want to be out helping people. I don't want to be at the desk writing up a report of what I have to do. So, but half their time or more can be writing up reports. And a lot of the time, the higher brass tells you to be out on patrol and then do the reports at the last hour of your shift, which then runs over, so they have to do overtime, unpaid overtime, basically, to get their reports in. Effort-reward balance. A lot of officers feel that they put in a lot more effort than the reward they get, either based through salary or promotion or any other type of reward they might receive. And then lack of social support. So this is one area that we all can help, and family members can help, and hopefully peers. A lot of officers feel a lack of social support from their peers within law enforcement, and then also from their family, and then from society in general. And right now, with all the things going on with videos even of law enforcement officers in different situations, there's been a lot more harassment with officers, which also increases to their stress. So when we look at stress, we kind of look at this allostasis, and this is the body's response to maintain homeostasis. All right, we have individual differences, and then whatever kind of happens, you have major life events, you have trauma, you have environmental stressors. All right, based on the person's experiences and genetics and things, we will kind of figure out, all right, what's your perceived stress? So my perceived stress for like today, right? I'm standing in front of you, I have higher stress, right? You guys all have low stress back there, unless I'm boring the crap out of you. Who knows, right? But at least you might be able to sleep, catch up on some easy, all right? And then, based on whatever you perceive the stress as you see how threatening it is, all right? Then we have physiological responses and behavioral responses, all right? Do you go to diet? Do you go eating extra ice cream, which I love to do? You go start smoking? You have to drink? Or are you a fitness fanatic? That's how you deal with your stress, all right? And then again, that will help go to your physiological responses. And then based on if those are good behavioral responses or a good perceived level of stress, we can either increase or decrease our allostatic load. Right? So the allostatic load is the building up of these stressors or the tearing down. It's basically the wear and tear on the body. So, and stress work kind of brings in one. All right? These are some things that have been looked at in shift work within police officers. We've seen a decreased driving ability and psychomotor vigilance. All right. An increase in cortisol response for novice Leos on night shift. So officers that came and started going on to night shift for 1.5 years, so 1 year, 6 months, they took a cortisol level measurement beginning before they got on that shift, and then at the end, they found that about 60% maintained an elevated cortisol level after a 1.5 years. So about 66, about 2/3 of the people that were put on night shift had increased cortisol level even over a 1.5 years. So if you have increased cortisol levels over that long time, that's going to increase the stress level, increase the stress response. Decrease in fitness levels with years spent on night shift. So that's going to be bad, as you already seen. And an increased stress on night shift. When we're saying stress here, we're saying stress as in like, right, having to perform stressful duties or job tasks. You have more robberies at night. You have more crime at night. So officers have to go through, you have more drunk college students at night. Okay? You have to deal with those things. And if anyone's been an RA before, had to deal with drunk college students, it's not fun. Or just had to deal with drunk college students. Batonin et al. Here kind of came up with this little diagram that's really nice to look at. So we have shift work, and they say it's circadian stress. They said there's some psychosocial stress that you get. You have work stress, you have work-life balance. So you're not able to be on the same schedule maybe as your family. So that kind of interferes. You have recovery from work. So your wife or your significant other is kind of pushing you to be with the family more, even though you're extremely tired, or you have to do certain job tasks. And then you see behavioral stresses. Sleep quality and sleep length go down with people that are on shift work normally. Smoking rates increase, nutrition decreases, you have weight gain, physical inactivity. And then you see some physiological responses. You have increase in inflammation, increase in blood coagulation, cardiac autonomic functions is dysregulated, and then the HPA axis is upregulated, and then blood pressure is increased. And all of those can increase cardiovascular disease risk. So when we kind of look into this, I want to just say one kind of new thing I'm looking at is arterial stiffness. So what is going on with the vascular changes that kind of demonstrate, or what in the vasculature is changing that will increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. The tunica media in the middle area here is the most area affected. All right, we see the changes greatest are in here. We see that elastin to collagen ratios change. As those change, the arteries become stiffer. As more collagen is taken over, arteries become stiffer. We see these two proteins and glycan end products kind of affect those changes, and they can be upregulated, which then cause this collagen to elastin to change. And then we see downregulation of nitric oxide, which hurts the endothelium of the artery, which then allows more insults like sodium, inflammation factors getting into the tunica media. Something that we've seen, and we've kind of touched on with all these other seminars, this thing is arteriosynthesis gives us earlier detection of how the vasculature is changing and how the increased risk of cardiovascular events. Right? And then it also allows us for preventative intervention. So, how's it measured? It's measured using signal core for us. We're using an Appalachian tonometer. And it's measured for the gold standard at the carotid and femoral pulses. And this is kind of a little picture that I kind of like to show here. So it shows you the difference between a stiff artery and an elastic artery. As you can see, the stiff artery during systole will kind of bulge up, decrease in afterload, and allows basically the artery to keep on contracting and allowing blood flow to continue during diastole. With a stiff artery, there's no change in diameter. The force from the ventricle is pushed through, and as soon as that's done, the flow coming back through the rest of the body is kind of slow during diastole. So, looking at what I've seen in other types of populations, so mixed on one firefighters, I've also seen Denise Smith. We've seen an increase in pulse rate velocity for 3 hours of firefighting, similar to heavy aerobic or resistance training. We've seen an increased augmentation index in firefighting for 1 unit of oxidative stress. And then low-dose aspirin has been shown to decrease augmentation index in firefighters. And then in the military, we saw no change in the pulse wave velocity in 6 months of deployment, but they did see increases in inflammatory markers, which might show us that over a 6-month period, maybe that's long enough to see the change in pulse wave velocity. So kind of getting into my thing, the specific aim of the study is to see what factors might contribute to arterial stiffness in law enforcement. Some of our hypotheses is that officers on first shift will demonstrate lower pulse wave velocity values than officers on third shift. And then officers with less perceived stress will demonstrate lower pulse wave velocity. And then officers with more moderate to vigorous physical activity will demonstrate lower pulse wave velocity values. Now, Adam just did a study with middle-aged men, and he did step counts. He didn't really see too much significance. If I'm getting that right? He didn't see too much significance. Cool. With just step counts. So we're hoping to see, all right, if we have a triaxial accelerometer, we can kind of say, all right, moderate to vigorous physical activity, the amount of time spent doing that. So study design, do a cross-sectional assessment of law enforcement arterial stiffness. Look at the effect of stress, and we'll also look at physical activity, and it'll be done here in the lab. These ends will probably change based on other people's numbers that we've got, so it might go a little higher. We're going to exclude females mainly because it's a male-dominated population, and the measure between sexes are variable. Subjects with known cardiovascular disease or CV preventive or on CV preventive medications like antihypertensives, because wave inflections can change. And then we'll start them off. We'll obviously get consent, and then we'll get a personal history questionnaire, and then we'll also look at work history questionnaire. So with shift, we might see, we're going to look at what shift they are on or have been on, but then I also thought it might be important to see, all right, how many years have they been on any shifts? Because that might be more telling. We read one article recently looking at bus drivers and their shift, and there's the only other article I've seen on shift work is with bus drivers, and it showed the years spent on third shift, increased arterial stiffness, slightly. And then we'll do some surveys, questionnaires, kind of get at stress. We have perceived stress scale for supposed to be job perceived stress scale. Highly validated in these two police stress questionnaires by McCreary and Thompson. Luckily, Dr. McCreary was able to send these to me. And then social provision scale. Basically seeing, all right, what is your social support like? And then we'll do, based on Dr. Clasey's recommendation, the chronotyping, trying to see, are you an owl or are you a lark? And then anthropometric data, we'll look at so height, weight, and then waist to hip ratio. And for our body composition, since it was recommended not to use just BMI, we'll still get BMI just because it's there, it's easily to see. And then we'll look at bioelectrical impedance. And we'll use a signal core. We'll get aortic pulse rate velocity measurements measured at the carotid and femoral pulse, the gold standard. And then we'll also look at some pressure waveforms. And then right now, we're kind of digging in to see if we might add heart rate variability there. I'm going over some literature right now to try to figure it out. And then for our physical activity and sleep monitoring, we use Actigraph. We're on 5 days, 3 days on duty, hopefully 2 days off. And then our activity intensities will be defined based on Friedson. And then subjects will also be asked to keep a log of their physical activity and their sleep, kind of make it a little more accurate. And then we'll do some descriptive analysis of Pearson product correlations, and then our goal is to use a regression analysis. Potential outcomes, what variables besides age and obesity, which are highly correlated with aortic stiffness, you can see what's else is accelerating stiffening, and then could this measurement provide physicians better information to their clients? I read an article by Zimmerman, and he's a physician in New York, and he basically was trying to say that physicians need to take care more of tactical populations because they're in different stresses. So this might be a tool that they can use. Could standards be set for cardiovascular health in law enforcement? And then could we establish CV health goals based on normative values?